Good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce Wendy and Kent from Avinion to present Visualizing Departmental Business and Citizen Use of GIS.
Good morning. I'm Kent Rothrock, for those of you that don't know me, Director of Managed Services at Avinion Incorporated. And this is a presentation we've done a few times, and it's really sort of longer than 20 minutes, so I'm going to go sort of fast. Again, we're going to talk about visualizing departmental business and citizen use of GIS. Quick outline, I won't go through all that. Again, for those of you that don't know, Avinion is a privately held technology firm with a global presence, several offices in the U.S. My former company, Highland Mapping, was acquired and merged with Avinion last year, and we provide lots of great services, including managed services and utility support and things of that nature. So today we're talking about change and planning for change. Most people that have managed GIS, a lot of you old timers like myself, know that GIS has grown organically over the years, and a lot of my colleagues and customers struggle with trying to maintain everything because suddenly we have 1 million apps and end users using desktop products, mobile products, etc. And a lot of what I'm talking about today is what does change affect your company and how to, or your business processes and how to manage it. A great example is somebody needs a field changed for a web app. Let's say something that's maybe a date field and maybe it's stored as an integer natively, and you need to switch it to be a date field so that somebody can search by date on a web application. So you make the change, but then it breaks something else. So we have so many hooks in our GIS circa 2023 that you've got to be very careful and plan for those sorts of changes. And most folks I know have elaborate, Excel spreadsheets, things like that, trying to keep up with where is all this stuff going, who all would be affected if I made a change. And so we need to plan for that change adequately. We want to avoid the pitfalls of change. So components to consider, the old components of GIS, databases, people and their skills, the IT infrastructure when we have to upgrade and replace, upgrading products and workflows. Again, how is changing your data model going to affect all of this stuff? And there's always business drivers that we as GIS managers don't necessarily have control of in our organization, so those have to be considered. So planning for change, we want to talk about the baselining versus a blueprint. So a great thing to be able to do in an exercise like this is baseline or document and be able to visualize your data model. And then, the baseline is what it is now. The blueprint is where we're going to. Think of an example where in a utility model, you're going from the geometric network to the Esri utility model. You've got to obviously carefully plan, field map, so forth and so on, take data from one data model to the other. It can vary in scale, and what we're talking about here is information modeling, which is a great way to mitigate problems associated with the inevitable change that we're all having to deal with. So baselining, again, systems evolve organically. Most growth is reactionary. I know with a lot of the clients I worked with over the years, we would just simply get requests, hey, this department needs this department needs that. We react, we create data layers, we create REST endpoints, we create databases. And again, it becomes this giant behemoth, even in small offices, that again, suddenly, we take one card out and the whole house of cards can fall. So we've got to be very careful. And also, we have obviously interconnectedness, integration everywhere. And systems, I know this isn't true for you guys, but they're not always completely documented or completely understood. So again, we've got a lot of potential pitfalls. So again, along those lines, challenges, lack of documentation, risk of losing institutional knowledge. So you need to create impact analyses and try to plan and figure out the scope. And you also have to communicate with your stakeholders when you're planning for this change. From a leadership standpoint, we want to, we're making these changes to our system. Can we increase efficiency? Again, we've got to consider all the implications, all the downstream processes that are going to be affected by our change, and try to do some risk analysis and mitigate, identify potential risk of making these changes to your data model and trying to mitigate them accordingly.
So what does all this change have to do with visualizing your GIS and how it's being used? And I want to talk a little bit about one of our customers, Traverse City Light and Power. They're an electric utility in northern Michigan. They've been in operation for over 100 years, and they serve a population of about 16,000 people. And a big project that they had was moving to the utility network. And they're a fairly small utility, so yeah, that's doable, no problem. Get over there. But, there are always things that whenever you're going to do a data migration and implement the utility network, because it's way more than a data migration, there's so much that changes that, you really have to start with that step in planning. So as we sat down and said, let's take a look at all the steps we need to go through to get you from A to B. And you can see that 3 of these are highlighted in yellow. And these activities are highlighted because these are some of the riskiest activities for them as they were starting to plan and make that move to the utility network. You can see the word document, documenting the integrations, the configurations, and also determining that level of effort to migrate their data. Because like all of us, we've all done a really great job of documenting every single thing we're doing in GIS, right? So that was one of the things that, having to take that look and take that step back of, let's see where it's all being used. I'm sure a lot of you have the same scenario where you've implemented ArcGIS Online or Portal, you've added your users, they have access, and now it's turned into the wild, wild west. And you have maps over here, you have services over there, there's a lot going on. And so before, moving ahead and starting to go through to the full utility network implementation, we're like, we need to take a look and really see what's going on. And that starts with that baselining that Kent was talking about. So really determining what is the current state of their GIS and being able to visualize how that's being used. Looking at, what are the data dependencies that you have across all of your different ways that it's being implemented? What is the relationship between the data, the services, the web apps, the other business systems? And, really as we started looking at, once you baseline that, we can see what the future is. We know what the data model, what their target is, but then how do we visualize how to connect all those pieces between the, current baseline state and that future state? And so we really recommend a 5-step approach to organizations when they're looking at getting from the current state, what they have, to that desired future state. And really taking that look at how is GIS set up and used today. And then from there, what's actually being used? There's probably a lot of services that you have out there that they were published at one time by one person who's no longer in your organization connected to the web map that's now lost that nobody's opened in 10 years. Do you need to continue maintaining that? Or is it something that you have an integration with CityWorks or another system and it's being used all day, every day? And then, of course, looking at, as you're planning for change, how is GIS going to be set up and used? And what needs to be adapted to get to that current or to that future end state? And then once you know what's there, how it's going to be set up, what do you really need to migrate? So also taking that opportunity to, once you're able to visualize and see everything, only take forward what you need to take forward. Junk in, junk out. Let's get rid of all the extra things that are no longer being used, because those are things on some level that you're still having to maintain it. Even if it's just sitting there, it's still something that's on your list that you have. So why don't we clean that up and make that a little bit easier? And so for them, as we started going through and sitting down, with them, they were like, okay, let's do that inventory. A lot of things start off with that spreadsheet. Let's see what they have, see what's being used, reach out to every person in the organization. And, but really ultimately the goal here is to identify what needs to be done to mitigate that risk that we were talking about. And of course, anytime, you're looking at new data models, there's always a chance that you are going to have to make changes, and that's going to change a lot of different things. So really going through these steps, it helped them be able to take a look at, no, here's what we need to do. But ultimately, as we're identifying this, there was the problem of it's really hard to visualize. When you have all these data in spreadsheets and you have 50 million columns and rows, how do you really see how it's being connected? And you can set up, and sort things, but it's a lot of information to process. And so really the solution that we are talking about, that, how do we really view that? We looked at one of the solutions that we've developed, which is Model Manager. And I don't want to talk a lot about the solution itself, but I want to talk about the visualization of it, because there are other tools out there that you can utilize and other things that can be set up. But really, this all starts with inventorying your data, taking a look at what's being used. And in this process, it's going to, really enable organizations to document. So when they do need to make those technical decisions, when someone comes to you and says, oh, well, now I need to change this, we're going to implement a new system. When you have that visualization, you can quickly look at it and say, oh, well, now we know that if we change that one field, it's connected to these other web maps and these other things. We may just need to republish the service, or this is going to break something and we need to, have a discussion about that. But also, it's a way to continue documenting what you have. And so this really builds into a data governance model, to be able to look at your data, be able to understand how it's interacting, but also, really creating some SOPs and documentation around your organization. So we're not just going in and changing everything. And that's ultimately going to help limit risk in any situation when we understand what we have there. And then, of course, throughout the process is also helping to really identify some of the required business needs. A lot of times when you're implementing a new system, people will come and be like, oh, well, I need this. Well, why do you really need it? What's the business driver behind it? And so, as I mentioned, this is really all about building that data model governance, being able to identify dependencies within your data, within your services, within your web applications. And then, of course, being able to diagram how all of that is connected. So for Traverse City Light and Powers, we started getting this information and putting it in the model. We were then able to start to see how it was all connected and looking at, oh, well, we have this web map and it's hitting this data and it is using these fields. This is what's on. And ultimately, it creates a centralized place for holding all of this information in one location. So there's not a spreadsheet here. There's not a table there that has that. And so this is a ArcGIS Pro add-in tool that they're able to utilize. So got it installed in Pro and then started entering in all of the information. The really great thing is that you can either start by manually entering or, also going out and crawling through your databases and starting to populate that. So a little mix of automation, a little mix of manual updating, but then, really started entering in those use cases and the dependencies. So really, when we break it down, think of, dependencies. This is what something is dependent on. That's the data. In use cases, that could be your web app, your script that's automated, that's updating different fields and all those different things. And then ultimately, once you have all your baseline, your current state entered, you can enter in what the future state, that data model is, and make those connections. But really having a way to also visualize how the data is being used and how it's being used across the organization. So as I mentioned, we started documenting the dependencies. Is this field even being used? Are there dependencies? Is it an internal system? Is it an external system? What are the different application names that it's interacting with? And then for them, because they are a utility, we started breaking down some of these properties by asset, so that they could see, oh, okay, this is an electric device. These are other things that are being used for it. And so just a lot of ways that digging in deep that they never really thought of before. And so once we got all the information together, we were able to, utilize the operations dashboards to really get that visualization piece. So you can see here in the top left, has a breakdown of the different use cases. And then it has the different classes and fields. And you can see how many times they're being utilized in those use cases. And then even from there, breaking down the dashboard a little bit more into customization. So you can see there are 2 customizations that they have that was categorized and putting it in. There's 4 maps that are utilizing the data, 11 applications, and 5 different interfaces. So now as they go through and select different things, they can see, okay, we go in and make a change, this is what it's connected to, but also see how much their data is being used. A lot of times we put things out there and we put it into different applications and may not know how often it is. And that also, on the data governance side, allowing them to create authoritative data layers. How many times, especially in Portal or ArcGIS Online, somebody's like, oh, here's my little clip of my data and I'm going to publish it and I'm going to put it there. But now that they're seeing how often it's being used, they're like, okay, well, let's create one layer or, one feature class that we're maintaining. It has all the information you'll need. We only have to have one service published now, and now we're not having fractions of data everywhere. And then, of course, the other big part of the visualization from them was being able to see the link analysis. So with the use of insights for ArcGIS, now they're able to get these really awesome graphics and click down and say, okay, well, we know this one field is being used with those 5 applications. And really just, instead of digging through the spreadsheet that a lot of information was getting lost, it's a very quick and easy way to go in and look at the data for them. And then, of course, as I mentioned, all the dependencies, so being able to look at those different dashboards and view that. So for them, taking that step back and documenting everything in the system really helped with their migration into the utility network, because now they're accounting for all of these little things and making sure each step along the way, they're bringing forth the data that they need for their business system integrations, so that once, they go live in the utility network and flip that switch, they're not getting calls from their organization, hey, this is down, this isn't working. And they're like, well, we didn't even know you had that. Like, I didn't know that existed. Like, where did you publish that? What server that's on? And so making sure, everybody's happy, everything's moving forward. But of course, one of the biggest takeaways is, like what all we do with documentation, it's never done. And that's the other piece of making sure that you stay current and up to date. And as you are creating new data, new applications and services, to keep that up to date. But we just found this is a really great way of, for a project for them, of making that big move, because it was changing so much in their organization, being able to have these visual aspects and utilize the GIS technology in a way that they hadn't really thought about utilizing it before, so that they could make those business decisions and make sure that they were making the right decisions and not leaving anything behind. So that, any questions? Nope, no questions? All right, thank you for joining us today.